Hi, sixth graders. So we are starting a brand new unit today, and this unit is going to be everything to do with equations. So I'm going to write that up here. And we're actually going to take several pages of notes within this equations unit. So today we're going to look at vocabulary. We're also going to look at modeling, and we're going to look at solving. So three different sort of sections within this equations unit, but today we're just going to look at equation vocabulary. All right, so for equation vocabulary, the first thing I want you to do is just really big up here at the top of your page, I want you to write 3x plus 2 is equal to 8. Now, you might want to pause the video right here and maybe go get you some colored pencils or something to maybe indicate different colors because we are going to color code some of these vocabulary words. So I'll give you a second and pause the video and grab you something if you've got something colored. If you don't have anything colored, I'll show you what you can do, but if you've got some colored pencils or crayons or something, that might be helpful. All right, so I hope you paused the video and we're able to get some something that's colored. So we're gonna look at the different parts of what we would call an equation. So the first thing I want you to do is if you have maybe just your regular color pencil or whatever you wrote in, I'm just gonna do it in my purple pen again. I want you to underline this whole thing. Now I'm gonna underline it a little bit lower than what you might think, so maybe on the next line, and I'll show you why I'm going to do that in a second. I want you to underline this entire thing. And let's just talk about, first and foremost, this entire math sentence. So the 3, the x, the plus, the 2, the equal, the 8, the whole thing we would refer to as an equation. All right, so this whole thing is an equation. So our first vocabulary word, equation. And what is an equation? Well, an equation is a math sentence with numbers, symbols, and the most important thing, an equal sign. Equals sign. You've got to have one of these if you're talking about an equation. And notice we do, right? What we are saying is we are indicating that this entire side of this, whatever this is equal to 8. It's the same thing as 8. So if you have an equal sign included in what you're talking about, then we call that an equation. And that makes sense, right? Equation, equa, it even starts with the word equal. And so that's going to be our first vocabulary word. It's just what is an equation. Now, I'm going to change colors. And so if you have something to change colors with, that might be helpful as well. The next thing that we're going to talk about is actually called an expression. So I'm going to take this pink, and I'm going to right above where I underline this whole thing, because remember the whole thing is an equation, just this side is what we would call an expression. So just this side. So ignoring the equal sign and ignoring the 8, this 3x plus 2 is what we would call an expression. Expression. And here's what an expression is. It's a term, which we're going to talk about what a term is here in a second, T-E-R-M, term, or combination of terms and operators. Now, we're going to talk about what a term is and an operator here in just a second. But the key for an expression is this. It does not include the equal sign. So basically this entire side. Now, if we wanted to be really, really, really precise about it, we could also actually say that 8 is an expression as well, because it does not include the equal sign. You can think of an expression as being everything but the equal sign. So like this entire, the left side or the right side without the equal sign. Now 8 is going to be actually something a little more specific. So we usually don't refer to 8 as an expression, but an expression is either side, the right side or the left side of the equation is what we would call expression. And so we use some words here that we haven't talked about yet, term and operator. So now we're going to jump into what a term is and what an operator is. And again, I'm going to switch colors. So I'm going to use a blue this time. And let's talk about what a term is. All right, so a term is a part of an expression or equation separated by an let's say separated by, not and, separated by a symbol, such as plus, minus, or equals. All right. So when we're talking about a term, we're talking about a part of the expression or equation. So it's actually all the pieces that make up. It's separated by either a plus sign, a minus sign, or an equal sign. So basically it's every piece here that we would see that is not the plus sign and is not the equal sign. So if I cover those things up, these are my terms. So 3 and x together would be a term. So that's in blue. Again, I'm covering up the plus and the minus. The 2 is a term. So 2 on its own is a term. And the 8 is a term. It's all of the pieces except for the plus and the equal sign, or if there were a minus sign here. It's everything else. So the terms, again, are just sort of the piece. I think of them as the pieces of the equation. So that's what a term is. Now, we also talked about operator. And so while we're talking about plus and minus signs, let's talk about an operator. So operator, O-P-E-R-A-T-O-R, operator, is basically a symbol which indicates either addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. Those would be what we would call operators. They tell us what kind of math to actually do. So notice in this case, we actually only have the plus sign as our operator. There is multiplication here because the 3 and the x are right next to each other, but we don't actually see a symbol, so we can't actually talk about it as an operator. So our only operator here is going to be the plus sign in green. All right, I'm changing colors again. And now let's talk about this word. So let's talk about a variable. V-A-R-I-A-B-L-E. I don't think my red's gonna work. Let's find another one. Hope you heard me throw that in the trash can. All right, let's try a different red pen. Here we go. Variable. All right, a variable. You may have heard the word variable before, and the most basic definition of a variable is a symbol, usually a letter, which stands for an unknown value. So a symbol, usually a letter, which stands for an unknown value. And so in our case, we have this letter, right? We have this X. I'm going to circle it in red to indicate that that's my variable. So my variable is a symbol, usually a letter. So any letter of the alphabet, X, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, all the way through Z. X is probably the most common variable we use. Y is also pretty common. But those are they stand in for an unknown value. So this is a number. This is saying 3 times something plus 2 would give me 8. And I don't know what that something is yet, but I want to know. And so the variable stands in for the place of what we do not know. All right, so that is a variable. Let's change colors again. I'm going to switch over to orange. The next vocabulary word we need to know is coefficient. C-O-E-F-F-I-C-I-E-N-T. Coefficient. And a coefficient is a number that is multiplied by a variable. a number that is multiplied by a variable. So if you can find the variable, you can always find the coefficient because it's going to be the number right in front of the variable. So in this case, notice we have an x, and the number right in front of that is the 3. So I'm going to circle that in orange. A coefficient is the number right in front of the x. So for example, you know, if we had, let's say, 4y, of course the 4 would be the coefficient. If you had, I don't know, even something like 101D, 101 Dalmatians, ha ha ha, 101D, D is your variable, so 101 is going to be the number right in front of it. It's always right in front of the variable. Now, if you just have a variable by itself, so let's say we just had S, how many S's is that? So anytime we have just a letter by itself, there's always an invisible 1 in front of it, because if you write down S, you're indicating that I have one S. So if it's a variable by itself, S is the same thing as one S. And so if you're asked about a coefficient in front of a number, like if I just said, or a coefficient in front of one letter, if I just said, hey, what's the coefficient on S? You would say 1. Because there is an invisible number 1 in front of it if it's just a plain letter. All right, so just keep that in mind for coefficients. Coefficient is the number in front of the variable. All right, we've got one more vocabulary word that we need to go over. So one more different color. I'm running out of colors. Aha, here's a brown. Let's use brown. All right, and so the last word is constant. So constant, and a constant is very simple. It's a number on its own. So whereas a coefficient is always going to be attached to the variable, it's always going to be right in front of it, the constant is just going to be a number on its own. So notice we have two numbers that are sort of on their own here, and I'm going to circle both of them. Those would both be our constants. It is a number that is just sort of stand by itself. Now notice that these constants are also terms, right? And the 8 on its own is also an expression. So the number 8 actually has several different words that could apply to it here. It's a expression, it's a term, and it's a constant. But probably at its most simple, we would call it a constant because it is just a plain number on its own. All right, so there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 vocabulary words that you need to know and be aware of. And so we're going to practice these over the next couple of days. Don't forget this about the coefficient being 1 if it's just a number on its own. And so I'm just going to give you a couple of practice problems down here at the bottom. And I want you to see if you are able to use the vocabulary words to indicate these. So I'm going to write out, actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's write out at least 6. I know we have 7 vocabulary words, but let's see if we can split this up into 3 sections, and then if you'll split it down the middle, that'll give us 6 spaces to write in, okay? So I'm gonna write a few things. So the first one's gonna be 21 equals x minus 11, and I'm going to circle the 11. The next one is going to be 9a equals 45, and I'm going to circle the 9. The next one's going to be 32 equals 3z plus 7, and I'm going to circle the z. The next one's going to be 19 plus 2g, and I'm going to circle the whole thing. The next one's going to be 12ab equals 99a plus 4, and I'm going to circle the whole thing. And then I'm going to do 6 plus 2x equals 10, and I'm going to circle the 2x. Okay, so take a second and look at those, and what I want to know is what vocabulary word would go with what is circled. So if you need to pause the video and look back at your vocabulary words, think about, okay, if I'm circling 11, what is 11? What would be the best vocabulary word to describe this 11? What about the 9? What's the vocabulary word that would describe the 9? What about the z? What's the vocabulary word that would describe the z? So pause the video, take a second, see if you can name those, and we'll go over them. All right, I hope you took a second to pause the video and try to come up with your own answers. So let's talk about these. So 11, probably at its best, the best word to describe this is a number on its own. So this one would be a constant. Now, you could also say that 11 is a term. So constant or term, although constant would be the best answer for this because it is a number on its own. It's also a term. It's also a piece. If you were to cover up, remember the equal sign and the symbols, then all of those are terms. So constant, though, is our best word here. All right, what about the 9? The 9 on its own, remember a number in front of a variable is called the coefficient. So the best word here is coefficient. What about the letter Z? That is a variable. So we would indicate variable. What about this whole thing? So we've got, if we covered up the plus sign, we've got actually 2 terms here. So we've got 19 and 2G. So this would be a 2-term, if we were to cover that up. But the whole thing is circled. And so I look at it and I think, okay, it's a combination of terms, but it does not have an equal sign. This is what we would call the expression. Remember, it's either the right or the left side, and if I imagine having an equal to something over here, it would be that entire right side. So I just don't have an equal sign here. The whole thing is an expression. However, in the next one, I do include the equal sign, and it's the whole thing. So this is an equation. Expression and equation. And then last but not least, again, if I cover up the plus sign and the equal sign, each one of those are terms, and so the 2x together, the 2 is a coefficient, of course, and the x is a variable, but it together is one of those pieces, and so this is a term. All right, so that is your equation vocabulary. There's examples of what each of these is going to look like. You're going to be responsible for identifying these things, especially when they're circled or you're asked about the specific word that indicates what you're looking at. Also, you'll be responsible for being able to count the terms. So I'm just going to go through here really quick, and if I were to, ask how many terms is in this first equation, remember, you cover up the equal sign and the minus sign, so how many are there? There's 1, 2, 3. How many terms are here? There's 1, 2. Again, you're covering up the plus and the equal sign. Here, there's 3. Here, there's 2, right? You cover up the plus sign, there's 2 terms. Cover up the plus sign and the equal sign. Here there's 1, 2, 3, and here there's 3 as well. So that's another thing that you'll have to count, is just to count the pieces or the terms. But that is equation vocabulary, and so you're going to practice with this over the next couple of days. Please send me an email if you have any questions.